Hello, good morning, everyone. I hope you are fine. Everybody's taking the precautions in this lockdown. And wish to congratulate all of you who have managed to keep yourselves safe in this period of lockdown. Without wasting so much time, I'm going to continue from where we ended with our topic on locomotion. Uh, Remember, we had an introduction of locomotion, and we had looked at why organisms locomote and why locomotion is necessary in living organisms. One of the reasons and one of the hypotheses of locomotion in animals we said organisms locomote for the reasons why locomotion is necessary in living organisms. One, we said living organisms locomote to escape predators. The predators are organisms or those organisms that attack and kill other organisms for food. So organisms locomote to escape, run away from their predators, the enemies, to avoid being killed. Then the other reason why organisms locomote is to find food. So organisms find food to grow. They find food to respire, because after eating the food, they grow. The process of growth is respiration to produce energy in their bodies. Then other reasons why organisms locomote is to find mates. Organisms locomote to find mates or for reason of reproduction, to reproduce. And reproduction is important in order to have continuity, right? To allow organisms to give rise to new young ones in order to have continuity of life. So they basically locomote to find mates, to allow reproduction, to give rise to new organisms in order to have continuity of life. Otherwise, many organisms which do not locomote are unable to easily find mates, although they have methods of reproduction, but those that locomote have the chance to find mates, to move about and find mates. Then the other reason why organisms locomote to, if you remember, in your senior one, many organisms locomote for reasons of they locomote to ensure that they can also look at organisms locomote as a way. Given one, avoiding predators, finding food, finding shelter, right? To find shelter or suitable habitats, or areas in which they can survive best. Right? So finding shelter, a suitable habitat, or areas in which they can survive best. So those are some of the reasons why organisms locomote, or why locomotion is necessary in organisms. Then the other bit we looked at, we're just reminding ourselves of what you had covered earlier about the topic. Remember, we didn't complete the topic. Having looked at that as some of the reasons why organisms locomote, we also looked at the structures organisms use in locomotion. The structures living organisms use in locomotion. Many organisms, we said, the structures used in locomotion. In living organisms. Many organisms have limbs. They have limbs. Those could be basically the legs, right? So they use those limbs either for walking. They use their limbs for running, right? So these structures help or enable the organisms to move, right? And others have wings. They have wings. These are used in flight. The wings are used by many organisms, such as the insects. The insects have wings. The birds also have wings. So all those structures enable organisms to fly and move and run. Then other organisms, in addition to those structures like the limbs and the wings, they also have muscles. They have well-built muscles. These muscles, they contract and relax. So enabling the organism to move. So some of the structures organisms need to move are the limbs, the wings, the muscles. In addition to those structures, there are other structures of the body of the organism that are also important or play a very important role in locomotion. One organism to move successfully in its habitat should be able to see. So these eyes are also important in visibility. In order to see clearly within their habitats, so as to dodge obstacles, to avoid collusion with such obstacles, when in motion. When in motion. Because it's very important for an organism to avoid hitting or colliding with an obstacle, for example, when it is moving. So organisms, to be successful in locomotion, should have eyes to see and avoid or dodge the obstacles, to avoid probably damaging their bodies. Avoid damaging their bodies. So many organisms, especially those that fly, right? They have very good eyesight. They have a very good eyesight. For them to see very well, right, within their habitat in order to avoid such obstacles. So some of those adaptations or features are important in locomotion. You had also looked at the different types of locomotion in different organisms. You had looked at locomotion in simple organisms like amoeba. So in some organisms, look at locomotion in some selected organisms, like for example, single-celled organisms, such as the amoeba. Amoeba is a single-celled organism. Single-celled meaning made up of one cell. So you wonder how such an organism that is the size of a cell and is able to move and carry out all processes that occur within a large organism. So in an organism like amoeba, locomotion is also possible. How does an amoeba move? Remember, an amoeba has a simple body structure. It has a very simple body structure. It is basically a cell. The whole body is in form of a cell, a simple cell, right? So this amoeba has a cell membrane. Or a plasma membrane. So it lives in moist, wet, damp environments, right? And from within its environment, it is able to obtain the nutrients. Within the same environment, it's where it can carry out excretion. It can allow removal of metabolic waste from its body. So it's over this simple cell membrane that the cell membrane can invaginate. The cell membrane is capable of invagination. It invaginates, i.e., it allows the cell membrane to fold to form finger-like structures or finger-like projections we refer to as pseudopodia. These finger-like projections called pseudopodia, right? Pseudopodia extend, right? These ones are normally extended. They are extended to propel the body forward. So in that way, the organism is able to move from one point to another by merely folding the body and extending. Remember, it has cytoplasm. The cytoplasm of this organism also aids in the movement of the organism. So such an organism like amoeba is able to use structures called pseudopodia in locomotion. Then other organisms besides amoeba, we have the paramecium. The paramecium. The paramecium. The paramecium. So locomotion in the paramecium. Locomotion in paramecium. And in paramecium, this is another unicellular organism. Paramecium has a simple body structure. The body wall of the paramecium has hair-like extensions. It has hair-like extensions. These are thin and so numerous. Thin and numerous. They cover the entire body surface membrane. So this organism is able to move using those hair-like structures called cilia. So it uses cilia in locomotion. Right? These cilia are able to move. The cilia move forth and back. Forth and back. Forth and back. And in so doing, the body is propelled forward. The body is propelled. The body is propelled forward from one point to another, right? So the cilia are always in motion and move about forth and back. So in so doing, the body of the organism is propelled forward. So paramecium, as I've said, is a microscopic, single-celled aquatic animal or organism. It lives in ponds and streams, but in particular in water that contains decaying plant and animal remains. So that is another case. Another mechanism of study can also look at locomotion in Euglena. Euglena, another example of a single-celled organism. Single-celled organism. Locomotion in Euglena. Euglena is another example of a single-celled organism. This one, if you remember in your senior one, we drew the structure of some of the single-celled organisms. And one of them is the Euglena. So Euglena has also a simple body structure. Remember, it is one organism that is so challenging in classification that it has structures called chloroplasts, right? And this organism is capable of photosynthesis, capable of making own food by photosynthesis because of presence of the chloroplasts. But our point here is about locomotion. Euglena has a whip-like structure called flagella. The flagella, like we have seen in paramecium, is also able to move forth and back, right? It lashes, brings about lashing movements to propel the body forward. The flagella it swings the flagella so as the body to move. So paramecium is also a unicellular, microscopic, aquatic organism that lives in fresh water. It contains chloroplasts and therefore is capable of carrying out photosynthesis. Euglena is propelled forwards in water by the lashing action of the flagella. So that is locomotion in simple organisms, which are basically unicellular. So far we have talked about locomotion in amoeba. The amoeba, we have said, it uses the entire cell surface membrane. The entire cell surface membrane. And we said the cell surface membrane is capable of invagination. It's capable of invagination to form structures we have called pseudopodia. Pseudopodia. Besides locomotion, the pseudopodia are also used in feeding, in obtaining food material from within its habitat. Then we also talk about the other organism we mentioned was paramecium. So paramecium, we have said the body surface of the paramecium is covered by hair-like structures called cilia. The cilia also bring about the forth and back movement so as to propel the body forward. And the other one we have talked about is the euglena. The euglena, we have said euglena has a flagella. A whip-like structure, long and extended. It is also moved about to swing, then the body is propelled forward. So, having talked about those simple organisms, we can also move on to look at locomotion in. We can also look at the types of locomotion. The types of locomotion, we may look at. First of all, we shall look at the skeleton. Many organisms that their body is made of a skeleton. A skeleton, we can look at a skeleton as a framework, right? A framework into which the structures that locomotion are laid. So if you look at the skeleton. On the skeleton, we said it is the hard part of the animal's body which provides it with some form of rigid support. And look at it as a framework, or a hard part of the body of an organism. A hard part of the body of an organism onto which provides some form of rigidity, to aid support of the body. Many organisms are able to move because their body has that framework, that hard part, right? That rigid part that provides the body with support, right? That provides the body with support. The types of skeleton. Types of skeletons. Different organisms have different types of skeletons. The different types of skeletons, we shall look at basically three main types. There are three main types of skeletons found in the animal kingdom. There are three main types of skeletons. One, we shall talk about the hydrostatic skeleton. Hydro. Hydro meaning a skeleton made or consisting of a fluid that is under pressure. Skeleton consisting or made of a fluid made of a fluid which is under pressure. Fluid that is under pressure. So that kind of skeleton that is made of fluid, right? So the fluid, the thickness of the fluid or the density of the fluid is important in aiding support in some organisms. So some organisms, their bodies are laid on rigid fluid material. An example of such an organism, you can look at the earthworm, right? The earthworm. So hydrostatic skeleton is found in soft-bodied invertebrate animals. So such type of skeleton is found in soft-bodied invertebrate organisms. Soft-bodied invertebrate organisms. Soft-bodied invertebrate organisms such as the earthworms. Good example and good organism of study is the earthworm. Earthworms. All of us, I believe, we are familiar with an earthworm. You have ever seen an earthworm? It is very important to have taken interest in how the earthworm moves, right? So, movements in such organisms or the body of an earthworm is attached against a fluid, right? So the body of the earthworm is attached. This one is attached onto a fluid. Is attached onto a fluid which is under pressure. So such an organism is able to move. This fluid provides the necessary support, right? The fluid is rigid. The fluid is rigid and provides the necessary support to the body. The body of an earthworm is also made up of muscles. And these muscles move against the fluid that is under pressure, right? So the earthworm, the body of the earthworm lies on the rigid fluid material, and body muscles are able to contract and relax. Body muscles of the earthworm that are lying and attached on that rigid framework of fluid are able to contract and relax. The body of an earthworm is made up of two types of antagonistic muscles. antagonistic muscles. The antagonistic muscles, the word antagonistic simply means working, opposing each other, right? Antagonistic would simply mean bringing about opposing effects to each other. So the mode of action of antagonistic muscles is that as one muscle contracts, the other one is relaxing, i.e., as one muscle contracts, the other relaxes. One contracts and the other one relaxes. So the two types of muscles in an earthworm, we have the circular muscles and the longitudinal muscles. So the two antagonistic muscles in the body of the earthworm, we have circular muscles and the longitudinal muscles. So as the body is to be propelled forward, the circular muscles contract. So when the circular muscles contract, the longitudinal muscles will be relaxing. So in locomotion in an earthworm, when circular muscles contract, the fluid is forced into a long and thin shape. The fluid is forced into a long and thin fluid. So as circular muscles contract, the body fluid is forced into becoming is forced into a long and thin shape. When circular muscles contract, the fluid onto which the muscles are attached becomes long and thin in shape. So in that way, the body segments are extended. The body segments are extended. Body segments are extended and become long and thin, becoming long and thin. So as they become long and thin, the animal is caused to move and change position. So the animal moves and changes position. It moves and changes to a new position. It changes and moves to a new position. That is one step, one effect that occurs on the circular muscles. We have said for the body of the earthworm to move, it uses its two muscles, which muscles are attached and lie on the rigid fluid, right? The rigid fluid. So when circular muscles contract, the fluid is forced into a long and thin shape. the body segments, remember the earthworm is segmented, so the body segments are extended, becoming long and thin. So the animal moves and changes to a new position. That is one step. Then the other step is when the longitudinal muscles contract. When the longitudinal muscles contract. When the longitudinal muscles contract, the opposite is true for this. When longitudinal muscles contract, when longitudinal muscles contract, when the longitudinal muscles contract, what happens? When the longitudinal muscles contract, the fluid is forced into a short and thick. The fluid is forced into a short, take note, forced into a short and thick shape. Thick shape. The fluid is forced into a short and thick shape. When longitudinal muscles contract, the fluid onto which the muscle is attached is forced into a short and thick shape. Remember here we said for circular muscles to contract, the fluid is forced into a long and thin shape. So the body segments are extended, becoming long and thin. So the animal moves and changes to a new position. Like I said, the opposite of the events that take place when circular muscles contract is true for when the longitudinal muscles contract. When longitudinal muscles contract, the fluid is forced into a short and thick shape. Then the body segments reduce in length. The body segments reduce in length. They reduce in length. Body segments reduce in length, becoming short and fat. Becoming short and fat. Becoming short and fat. Becoming short and fat. The animal is able to grip onto the ground. The animal is able to grip onto the ground. Is able to grip onto the ground. So basically, those changes are very important in aiding locomotion and movement of the body of the earthworm. So that is one organism that has a hydrostatic skeleton, and a very good example of how it moves using its hydrostatic skeleton. Then the other type of skeleton is the exoskeleton. Other organisms have an exoskeleton. So we have so far looked at hydrostatic skeleton, and we have given an example of an organism that uses a hydrostatic skeleton and how it moves using its hydrostatic skeleton. The other one is the exoskeleton. Exoskeleton. So this type of skeleton is formed on the outside of the body of the animal. So this type of skeleton is formed on the outside. It is formed on the outside of the body of the animal, outside of the body of the animal, outside the body of the animal, right? As the name is, exo, outside. It is on the outside of the body of the animal, right? But provides that framework onto which the muscles are attached, or the structures for locomotion are attached. So exoskeleton is composed of a hard material called cuticle. Exoskeleton is composed of a hard material. Is composed of a hard material. Is composed of a hard material. Is composed of a hard material called cuticle. A hard material called cuticle. Cuticle. Which is made up of a tough polysaccharide called chitin. Made up of a tough polysaccharide called chitin, and has a thin waterproof outer covering of wax, and has a thin outer covering, waterproof covering, has a thin waterproof covering of wax. So this material provides also that rigidity that is necessary and important in aiding locomotion. Inside the exoskeleton are some projections for muscle attachment, right? So within the exoskeleton, you can say inside the exoskeleton, are projections for muscle attachment. Projections for muscle attachment. Projections for muscle attachment. Then animals with exoskeleton have a behavior or a tendency that this exoskeleton, since it is made up of a very hard material called cuticle, or made up of a tough polysaccharide called chitin, they have one challenge, that it is so rigid that it is unable to allow the body to extend or stretch. So it limits the size of the animal, right? This chitin limits the size of the animal. So these animals, can say animals with an exoskeleton, periodically shed off their cuticle. Right? Periodically shed off their cuticle to allow a new and soft cuticle appear. I think many of you will agree with me that insects are good at shedding off their cuticles, right? This process of shedding off the cuticle, a process referred to as molting. The process referred to as molting, or you can also call it ecdysis. So in the process of molting, a new cuticle appears. The insect will swallow air, take in water and food, the body will stretch. Molting as a process is important in body growth, allowing the organism to grow. Now, these organisms that have an exoskeleton, how are they able to move? Right? Because the examples of organisms with an exoskeleton are many. Exoskeleton is common among arthropods, which include the insects, the arachnids, myriapods, the crustaceans. So we shall look at those ones later. We shall look at those organisms later, one by one. The other type of skeleton is the endoskeleton. The endoskeleton. So the third one, so maybe I will give an example. I'll give an example of an organism that uses the exoskeleton, or has an exoskeleton, as the insects or the arthropods. So the third type of skeleton is the endoskeleton. Endoskeleton. This one is inside the body. It's within the body of the organism. So endoskeleton is the type of skeleton found or lies entirely inside the body of the organism. This one lies entirely inside the body of the organism. It lies entirely inside the body of the organism. Body of the organism. It lies entirely inside the body of the organism. As the word is, endo, inside, skeleton, within the body of the organism. It's made up of bones and cartilage. This type of skeleton is made up of bones and cartilage. It's made up of bones and cartilage. It is made up of bones and cartilage. A very good example is we human beings, right? Our bodies are made up of very hard material called bone. The surface for muscle attachment. So the bones and cartilage provide surfaces for muscle attachment. The endoskeleton is found in all vertebrate animals. Endoskeleton is found in all vertebrate animals. It's found in all vertebrate animals. When you talk about vertebrate animals, those are animals that have a backbone, right? Animals with a backbone. A good example is we human beings. All of us have a backbone stretching from the neck, right, all the way to the wrists or the waist. That those are animals with a backbone or a vertebral column. Examples, you can talk of mammals like man. So examples of animals with an endoskeleton. You can talk of man, or give an example of most mammals like man, a very good example there. The cow, the sheep, the whales. The cow, the sheep, the whale, all these have a backbone. Then other animals that have backbones. You can talk of the birds or the apes. The birds, or the apes. The different examples of birds you can mention, like the doves, the pigeons, the ducks, the turkeys, the reptiles, are other organisms having an endoskeleton. Reptiles. So the examples of the reptiles, you can talk of the snakes, the lizards, the crocodiles. Snakes, lizards, and the crocodiles. The crocodiles. All these organisms have a backbone. The fish or the pieces. These ones also have a backbone. Different examples of the fish. Talk of tilapia, Nilo perch, and the salmon fish. The amphibians. Among the amphibians, give examples of the toads, the frogs, the newts, and the salamanders. Right? Those are organisms that have an endoskeleton. Whose skeleton is entirely lying within the body, right? Onto which is basically made up of bones or cartilage. Within the remaining time, we can also talk about briefly, the functions of the mammalian skeleton. And we call it again. So the functions of the mammalian skeleton. The functions of the mammalian skeleton. There are quite a number of functions. One, we can segment them into the following. Support. One is support. Like we have been talking and discussing about how organisms are able to move their bodies. Their muscles are attached onto skeletons. So the skeleton provides that support, gives the body shape and form, right? So gives the body shape, and a form, right? So just imagine your body had no bones. How would it have been looking like? So it's due to that skeleton that the body is in shape and has a particular form. The skeleton also provides a framework onto which internal organs are suspended, right? Provides surface onto which body organs are suspended. Then the other function, you can also talk about protection. The skeleton, as we have mentioned, these bones within the body, right, provide protection, right? Especially to delicate parts, such as the brain, the lungs, and the heart. All these are protected by a skeleton. The brain is enclosed within the skull. The skull is very hard, so the brain is very delicate. The lungs are enclosed within the thoracic cavity. The thoracic cavity is made up of the rib bones, into which also the heart is lying. So the other function is locomotion, right? Locomotion. The skeleton performs a function of locomotion. So in summary, those three functions will guide us onto knowing the main functions of the skeleton as support, protection, locomotion. The others, right? The other functions, we can talk about some of the skeleton is involved in the production of red blood cells in the body. Our red blood cells are made in the red bone marrow, right? Red bone marrow. So we can also give that one as a function of the skeleton. Production of red blood cells. Red blood cells made in the red bone marrow. Made in the red bone marrow. And these ones are important in the transport of oxygen in the body. The skeleton is also important in storage of mineral salts. Storage of mineral salts. Mineral salts. Our bones store a lot of mineral salts, which nutrients the body needs as well. Then the other function, the skeleton is also important in the transmission of sound. Transmission of sound. Transmission of sound. Transmission of sound. An example here, the three ear ossicles. The three ear ossicles. The three ear ossicles are very important in amplifying sound. They're very important in amplifying sound and therefore transmit sound. The rib cage is important in breathing movements. Breathing movements. So here you can cite an example. The rib cage. The rib cage. Remember, the rib cage has an attachment of the two important muscles that bring about breathing in many animals, right? Those two muscles we talk about as external intercostal muscles and internal intercostal muscles. So those some functions are very important as far as the skeleton is concerned. So the skeleton is very supportive in many functions within the body. Okay, so for today, our lesson will end with that. We shall continue and look at more about locomotion and the structures concerned with locomotion in different organisms. We wish you a good day. Thank you. Move the video. Is it?